Elaine, can you tell me about the Challenging the Crisis project?
Sure. So Challenging the Crisis project was run from 2013 to 2016, three-year project funded mainly by the European Commission, and it was set up by IDEA as a lead partner with partners in 5 other European countries, and they were the countries mainly affected by the financial crisis in 2011. So Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal and Slovenia, with Ireland as well. And it was a project that aimed to bring together those countries that were experiencing austerity and through development education, develop a campaign that young people could lead and that they could lobby the European Parliament on.
And why do you think those issues were important? Like, why that project and not another one?
I think it was a real challenge for people doing development education in 2010, 2011 to address those issues of austerity and the financial crisis. So we were I remember chatting to people in other European countries about it, and we were kind of saying, like, how do we address the inequality and the unfairness and the injustice that's happening in our own countries and being perpetrated by some of the same institutions that we would talk about as having unfair policies in the developing world or the global south. And it was really difficult. So we kind of had to take the bull by the horns and start to address it, because it was such a gap in, I suppose, our previous experience of doing development education in Ireland. Certainly in the last 10 years anyway, and we were used to kind of working in quite an affluent environment and talking about countries that were far away from us who had less or who had, experienced inequality, but this was happening now in our own countries, and we really had to start to draw the parallels between them. And the appetite for the project then came out through that. The director of IDEA at the time, just having conversations with people doing dev ed in Spain, Italy, Portugal, and they thought, okay, let's put in an application together to address this.
And so when the funding bid was successful, how did the project start to come together? How do you bring so many partners and countries together, and how did you get up and running?
So I think they got the go ahead in probably 2012, and then I joined the project in 2013. So it had started about 3 months at that stage, so I was the project manager. And luckily I had a personal relationship with quite a few of the people involved in the other countries through other work I had done. So we literally just had I think in my first week, we had the kick-off meeting in Ireland where we brought the partners over, had a meeting about our vision for the project and actually implementing it, because anyone who's been involved in any of these funding bids before, like, they're very, very big projects. They're large in scope, lots of different targets, lots of different stakeholders involved. And we just had to kind of try and read through the project contract and be like, okay, what have we agreed to do here? And because I was new to the project, I suppose I had a bit of catching up to do.
And were there any particular lessons learned in terms of how you would manage that project again?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Like, I think if I was managing a project like this again, whether I was involved previously or just brought on, after the contract started, I would just spend much more time interrogating the details of the project before we kicked off, and kind of deciding what we were going to maintain from the original plan and what we wanted to sort of redesign, and go back to the donor with that. There was, like any of these funding bids, like, they're put in and sometimes, you include things that you haven't had the chance to fully formulate or fully think through. They're written 2 years before the project starts, so things have also changed, especially in terms of austerity and the financial crisis. Like, it was so current that it would have been really beneficial at that time to take a couple of months and think through the project design. And I think we probably thought we didn't have that time available to us, but in hindsight, I think that our donor, the main funder, would have been open to that.
And when you did get up and running, say halfway through, 3/4 way through, what were some of the mechanisms you used to successfully manage and maintain the partnership?
I think we developed quite a good relationship with the donor, with the desk officer that we were working with, and just kind of tried to keep them informed of what was happening. We had a major hiccup in the design of the project from the donor side. That meant that there was kind of an error, that they had agreed to something that actually wasn't possible. And as a result, we renegotiated some of the project. We were allowed to use our contingency fund, which was brilliant, because that meant we could bring on board a campaign officer for the 6 countries, and that person was based in Ireland and just massively led the campaigning aspect of the project, leaving me to kind of do the project management stuff. Apart from that, then, we had we were in very close contact with the partners. Like, there was only 7 organisations involved, which is actually fairly small scale for some of the current European projects. So we were in touch all the time. Like I was in contact with them as much as I was with my colleagues in the office. Monthly meetings, you know, just trying to keep up to date by email, keep each other informed. And again, I probably would love to have some sort of a project management system, like an app or something online to have used at the time, just to kind of keep track on all that stuff. Because a lot of it was just kind of inside my head as the project manager or saved somewhere in a file, but probably we needed a more coherent system to bring it all together.
And then overall, what would you say were some of the highlights of the project when you think back?
The project was hugely exciting. Like when I heard about it before I joined IDEA, like it was really groundbreaking that, you know, the countries involved were coming together to talk about development education. And, you know, it was unusual in that there were no developing countries partners from the Global South in the project, which is very unusual for a DevEd. I don't know any other DevEd projects funded by the Commission that would have that set up. So it was really unique and, you know, definitely very motivating to be involved in. A major stakeholder that I haven't mentioned obviously are the Young Global Advocates. So there was a group of young people recruited in each of the 6 countries, and they were kind of brought on a sort of development education journey and educational process over the 3 years that culminated in them developing a campaign about halfway through the project and working together. That was hugely motivational. The young people involved were amazing in all of the countries. They had huge energy. And they, you know, the message that they were bringing was much more effective coming from them than it was from organisations working in the sector. Like anyone who met them was very inspired by what they had to say, and I suppose they were coming from a real genuine place of caring about the inequality and injustice that they saw, and they wanted to do something about it. And even having the solidarity between the countries, I think that gave the young people great heart and thinking, okay, well, young people in Spain and Italy are going through the same thing as me, and they care about the same issues in the world around them. So they were definitely some of the highlights.
What would you say was the main achievement of the actual impact of the project?
Excuse me. It's hard to say. I mean, I think the young people themselves, we can see them now going down the route of working in this kind of sector. Quite a few of the Irish Young Global Advocates are working abroad now in kind of development contexts. Or kind of involved in campaigning and activism at home, and I think the same would be said of the other countries as well. I think we managed to get social and solidarity economy. That was the sort of main focus of the project. We got that onto the agenda of the Irish MEPs. I think most of the other countries, they were familiar with the concept before. The MEPs were familiar with it, and some of the political parties and political groups in the European Parliament do a lot of work in it. But the Irish MEPs in particular, it was kind of new to them. And I think quite a few of them then went on to work on it in much more depth than I suppose they might have previously.
And tell me a little bit more about the social and solidarity economy aspect.
Yeah, so halfway through the project, the Young Global Advocates, so there's about 60 of them, 10 from each country, they came together in Brussels for 4 days, and part of that was to choose, part of the reason for that meeting was to choose a campaign topic. So each country brought their own kind of idea of what they thought was the best way to challenge the crisis. And it was kind of a combination of proposals from the other countries, but quite a lot of the young people were active in cooperatives, in kind of the social economy sector, in kind of ethical banking, fair trade, and they saw this model as a way to kind of challenge, I suppose, what they saw as the injustices within the capitalist system and the experiences that they'd had directly as a result of the crash. And it was actually a very, very new topic to us, and that was a real risk, I think, that we took in IDEA, that we were kind of open to any suggestion, and we had said that the campaign would be chosen by the young people, so we had to kind of stand behind that. And even the Irish young people, they were very enthusiastic about the idea, but they had very little knowledge of it, as we did. So we really had to go off then and do a lot of research when we came back to Ireland. And in Ireland, it's called, I suppose, it's called the social economy, or there's kind of like not really a sort of sectoral name for it. I think people would probably call it corporate social responsibility and that kind of thing, social enterprise. Whereas in Spain and Italy, for instance, like the solidarity aspect of it was huge. So they wanted to call it, the campaign was for the social and solidarity economy. It wasn't just about cooperatives, it was about the kind of ethics of their business as well. So that's kind of how it came about.
And what were some of the main challenges along the way? And I'm wondering, did language, culture, time zones, technology, were they issues?
Yeah, I mean, they were a factor to a certain extent. As I said, we had quite a good personal relationship between the project managers in each country. And that was kind of a challenge in some ways as well as a benefit. Like sometimes we were kind of almost too familiar with each other, too friendly, too informal, and maybe some of the deadlines and things like that slipped. I think also the countries that are involved would have similar cultures in some ways between them, around just the influence of, I suppose, the Catholic Church, attitudes towards family and society and culture. But in lots of ways we're quite different as well in how we work. So sometimes you assume that you have the same understanding about certain issues, but actually it's very different. So that definitely came into it as well. Time zones, less so, it was kind of an hour or two. We did get the wrong time for meetings a few times, but that wasn't much of a challenge in the end.
And overall, what would you say are some of the main learnings from the project?
Yeah, I think there's loads around like working in partnership and the challenges related to that. I think one aspect that I pick up on probably is the bringing together of campaigning and development education can be quite a conflict in some ways, but it's a great opportunity. Because if you're having an educational process, you need to say that the agenda should be set by the learners. And then to do that, for a campaigning organisation, often they would have the campaign set, the idea of what they want to achieve set in advance. So trying to bring those together, that challenge was interesting. I think we managed to do it, but it kind of led to, it was very long because you had to get agreement and you had to kind of, get people talking to each other about what they understood by the campaign topic. Working with the social and solidarity economy sector, I think this would go for any other sector, was very beneficial. We got a huge education in terms of the sector in Ireland. One area it was a challenge, I suppose, is that it would have been better to have them involved much earlier in a project like this. We couldn't because the design of our project meant that the campaign topic had to be selected, and then we started to approach the social and solidarity economy sector. But it was difficult for the organisations we were approaching as well, because we had quite a clear idea of what we wanted our campaign to do in some ways, and quite clear goals and a very clear time frame. And it didn't allow maybe for some of that more just organic development of the relationship, because we were going in saying, okay, in the next 12 months we want to achieve this, this and this with our campaign. So it didn't leave that much room for kind of their ideas and input on the campaign agenda. And there was very little ownership from the social and solidarity economy sector of the campaign as a result, because they saw it as coming from, I suppose, our organisations. So again, I think, the benefits of working in partnership are to kind of get beyond just that sort of project model and try to have longer term relationships.
And how do you think IDEA and your members can further develop this type of work, and why do you think that's important with some of the challenges we face in the world today?
I think it's really important, and I think it's a great opportunity to, you don't have to enter into a formal contract, a formal agreement with organisations to work together with them. And I think sometimes we wait for that sort of formalised relationship to set up projects and to run things together because you want it to be adequately resourced and etc. But I think it's just useful to start having conversations with people who work in similar and related sectors or have similar interests to the work that we're trying to do to promote social justice, sustainable development. And I think that's the real kind of key to this sort of work. I think it's extremely important because, we all are very aware of the challenges facing the world today. Some of them are on our doorstep now within the European Union. Things like Brexit, and also the election of Donald Trump in the States, and the sort of rise of, I suppose, far-right groups and extremism. So, and we're kind of in the middle of that in Ireland, like we're between, we're very closely linked culturally to the States and to the UK as well. And none of us can challenge those issues to get alone, and we need to come together with other people who have similar interests in that sector. And things like the Sustainable Development Goals won't be achieved by NGOs, by non-profit organisations, by governments alone. Like, we need to work together with businesses, with educational institutions, research, science. Like, everybody kind of needs to come together and try to throw their energy behind Sustainable Development Agenda, and hopefully give people something to actually work towards and have hope in, that hopefully that will also distract from some of the other far right and giving the agenda or the floor to those voices as well.
Elaine, thanks very much for your time.